Welcome, everyone. We are live with another episode of Level Up Law, where every Tuesday at noon, South Carolina Legal Services is leveling up your legal knowledge about an area of law that we practice in. I'm Senior Staff Attorney Susan Ingalls. I'm here with our producer, Kenneth Elliott, who will be in the background with me today. You are viewing live Brian Knight and Mark McMahon with the FBI here in South Carolina. Today is Valentine's Day, and what better way to observe it than to explore romance scams and the general problem of elder financial fraud. So Mark and Brian will be discussing that with us today. I do want to thank our partner, South Carolina WEAD, which stands for World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, which most of you know. We have a task force here in South Carolina made up of a number of agencies, entities, individuals, and groups who are working with the elder citizens of South Carolina to protect them and educate them. And our law enforcement is a big part of that. So that's why we're so glad to have Brian and Mark with us today. Brian Knight is an intelligence analyst working for the FBI Columbia Complex Financial Crimes Unit. He has been in Columbia for 2 years, where he's focused on elder fraud and abuse and looking for ways to educate the public about the relevant fraud schemes happening here in our area. Prior to his time in Columbia, Brian worked for an FBI headquarters unit out of West Virginia for 3 years. So welcome, Brian. We're so glad to have you with us. Also, Special Agent Mark McMahon has been a member of the Columbia FBI for 3 years. In his time there, he has served on the Complex Financial Crime Squad. How about that? Special Agent McMahon investigates financial fraud and abuse and schemes, including the romance scams that we'll have a little bit of a focus on today, elder fraud, and all kind of other schemes that involve financial loss. Prior to working with the FBI, he obtained his CPA. Well, that's important when you're talking about money and numbers and finance, so that's an important background to have. And while CPA worked with individuals and companies in managing their financials. So welcome, Analyst Knight and Special Agent McMahon. We're so excited to have you with us. But before we get started, I do want to remind everybody that this is not legal advice. It's just general information for the public. If you need the help of a lawyer, you can call our intake line here at South Carolina Legal Services or apply online 24/7. The information on how to do that is going to be provided on a final slide at the end of today's presentation. And also, as a reminder, all of our episodes will be posted by producer Kenneth Elliott within about 24 hours on our YouTube channel. So be sure and check that out. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and join the over 1,800 subscribers who are getting free access to video resources with new video content being added each week. And if you like video content, we're also on TikTok. Yep, we already hit 300 subscribers there, so you might want to consider joining our TikTok family as well. We're also on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, where we post daily content to help create equal access and keep you informed. Again, those websites and social media handles will be provided on the last slide of today's presentation. All right, let's get to it. Brian and Mark have agreed to, if time allows, answer questions at the end of their presentation. And so if you do have questions for them, you can feel free to put those in the question box, not the chat box, but the question box. And we will look forward to that. I do want to let everyone know that the QR code that you see on your screen is a way for you to subscribe to our newsletter here at South Carolina Legal Services. So if you haven't scanned that already, go ahead and do it now. We will also give that QR code again at the end of the presentation today. This QR code is one of my favorites because this is how you can suggest a topic for Level Up Law. So you just scan that QR code and send us your ideas. We always want the information and content that we provide here to be relevant to the general public and our viewers. So we thank you all for being here today. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Special Agent McMahon and Analyst Knight for their presentation on elder financial fraud and romance scams.
All right. Would you do your introduction?
Yeah, like Susan said, my name is Mark McMahon, a special agent with the FBI. Really grateful for giving us the opportunity to come here and talk with y'all. I'm hoping that you learned something today.
Yeah, my name is Brian Knight. I'm an intelligence analyst, and like Susan said in my intro, I've been working this for about 2 years now. And really our goal is to just provide the public with knowledge of what scams are, some of the methodologies they might use, so that way you can try to recognize them. Now, as you can tell from the intro slide, it's financial elder fraud. So typically we do have a targeted audience for these, elder being defined as anyone 60 years and older. However, you know, the information provided today is good for all parties. It's not necessarily only meant for people 60 years and older. So even if you don't quite reach that threshold, this is still good information to have in the back of your mind as you go forward through life. And maybe if it's not information for you, maybe it's information for a family member or a friend that you can help them out. And the other point I'd like to make before we jump into this is a lot of the numbers, we're going to go over some dollar values today. Those are going to be South Carolina specific. So these aren't, oh, this is what's happening across the whole country. It might never happen to you. We actually have the numbers to show what is happening here in this state, affecting all South Carolinians. So just keep that in mind as kind of we go forward. But so at the FBI, we have seen an increase in the amount of people who have fallen victim to financial elder fraud. And so again, we're hoping today that we're going to better equip you with the knowledge and know how to protect yourself, family members, and those around you from people who are trying to financially fraud you.
Yeah, and like Brian said, a lot of times we give these, we try giving these talks all over South Carolina. A lot of people that are below the elder fraud age, they think that they're less susceptible, or they're going to be more protected against these. But I've spoken with a lot of people under elders who don't qualify being elders, who have fallen victim to these same schemes. So it really is applicable to everyone. We'll give you some real world examples of some of these. We're going to start with the video though. The video is not specifically a romance scam, but it has a lot of the same characteristics of romance scams, and so that's why we wanted to lead off with that.
Okay. All right. So we just like to show that video as kind of a tone setter for some of the things that we'll be talking about, and to also point out that this can truly happen to anyone regardless of kind of what your background is. So just something to keep in mind as we go forward. So what is elder fraud? Try to put the best definition we can on it is the illegal or improper use of an older person's funds or resources. Now, if you look at some of these, the bullets up here on the screen, across the entire country, this is one of the few numbers that isn't necessarily South Carolina specific, 1.7 billion in reported losses. Okay. $1.7 billion in reported losses. Now, the key word there is reported. Only 1 in 44 incidents of financial harm is actually reported to the authorities. Now, it can be for a multitude of reasons. A lot of the times, people tend to be embarrassed that it's happened to them, right? They don't want to admit to family members that they might have lost money, or maybe they just don't know actually how to report it. So it's also another thing to keep in mind as we go forward that a lot of these numbers could be significantly higher just given the amount of people that you that aren't actually reporting it.
Yeah, and it's important to note that elder fraud and other romance scams and other financial frauds, it's not like normal theft, to where if someone runs up to you on the street and grabs your purse or grabs your wallet, you immediately know that you're a victim in that crime, right? If someone breaks into your house and steals a TV or steals other things, you wake up and you immediately find out that you're a victim. Elder fraud and romance scams and things like this, they don't always have to be that way. Sometimes we speak with individuals who have been a victim for months and they don't even realize it. Some of these people have been approached by family members, have been approached by friends, have even been approached by law enforcement, and they still don't believe that they're a victim of that fraud. And so just over 5% of older adults, both men and women, experience financial exploitation each year. In South Carolina, that's 43,766 South Carolina residents. So basically either you or someone you know or a friend of a friend will have fallen victim to elder fraud at some point in their lives. Older adults with cognitive impairment suffer greater economic losses. These losses include financial loss, obviously, but also hospitalization, and we've even seen some cases of institutionalization. The reported loss has doubled. This is a growing trend. Elder fraud, romance scams, all these other frauds, they're not going away. They're increasing. Our slide says it's more than doubled since 2016, but that's almost to put it lightly. We just got the numbers in for 2022, and in 2016 for South Carolina alone, it was 5.1 million in total losses. In 2022, it was 47.5 million. So in about 6 years, we've gone from 5.1 to $47.5 million in losses. So this is growing at a substantial pace.
And again, to keep in mind, going back to the previous slide, is that it's still only accounting for 1 in 44 people on average actually reporting. So that $47.5 million could be substantially larger. And again, our goal today is how we're fighting this, is to provide you with the information to help better protect yourself or your loved ones. So we talked about what elder fraud is, but how do they go about actually committing these frauds? The reality is anybody can, right? You always have to be vigilant, you always have to be aware. But we have tried to kind of break them down into some categories that we typically will see them into. And so here are our 4 categories, and we'll go into each one and kind of give a brief description.
Mm-hmm. And so the first one, and this one is not a surprise to anyone that we speak with or speak to, is strangers. So these are people that you don't know, that you don't have previous relationships with. A lot of times these people add you on social media. We'll talk specifically about some situations where they are added on Facebook or on GroupMe. Anyone that you don't have a previous relationship that has to start building that trust from the ground up. Romance scams, the vast majority of them fall into the stranger category. But just to make you all aware of the other types of fraud schemes, family members and friends can also commit fraud. Actually, so 53% of all elder fraud issues come from family members and friends. The reason why that is, right, is that these people, a lot of times it's descendants or heirs of of the elders. And these people view their parents' money or their grandparents' money as their money. And so they don't find issue with taking a little bit ahead of time.
So our next category is lawyers and financial planners. And so as you get older in life and you start accumulating more wealth, oftentimes we look to these individuals to try to help us make our best decisions with our money. And I'm not going to sit here and say that you shouldn't, but the advice I tell people is that you should never put 100% faith or commitment into somebody that you don't truly 100% know, right? And you might go out and hire a lawyer, hire financial planners, but you're giving them the ability to abuse that power that you're giving them. So always keep in mind, ask questions, ask where your money's going, and don't just assume that people who aren't you are always truly going to have your best interest in mind. And then finally, the last one is nursing home staff and caregivers. Financial abuse in nursing homes can occur in a number of ways. Stealing checks, taking cash out of someone's purse, running ATM cards, and steal through other means. And this is, unfortunately, tends to be one where the individual, it goes on for a long time before people actually become privy to what's happening.
And this slide's not supposed to scare you all. It's not supposed to make you distrustful of everyone around you. It's really just supposed to open your eyes. Just people can steal from you, and we just need to be aware of that, and we need to be constantly monitoring our financials so that we know if something goes wrong.
Absolutely. So how does this actually occur? What are the methods that they use to actually try to commit fraud? And again, just like the previous slide, it can happen in a multitude of ways, but we're trying to give you the best generalization of the categories that we find here in South Carolina they typically fall into. So the first one is telephones. And at times, this really can seem like the most common. When we're doing this in person, I usually like to see a show of hands for how many people in the last, let's just say, week have received some sort of phone call, right? In today's world, it's nearly impossible to know how many different people have your phone number or how many call lists you appear on, asking you about extended car warranties or maybe chronic back pain. Just something to get you on the line. Now, these fraudsters will make hundreds, if not thousands, of phone calls in a day or two, knowing that the overwhelming majority of people are just going to hang up within seconds. However, they make their money off of just a handful of people who aren't really sure what's going on to try to get you on the hook. And again, it's this just small handful of people really where they make their money. And once, a lot of the times we see it's once they get you once, you'll probably start receiving phone calls from other fraudsters as well.
Mm-hmm. Email is not as big of an issue as it used to be, even maybe 5-10 years ago. Our email systems have gotten a lot better at separating out the junk and the spam emails, but some just still get through, right? And so historically, we had a lot of issues with some of the Nigerian print schemes or things like that, which you maybe have been aware of. But generally, the concept of the email fraud schemes are they'll send a link or they'll send an action, and they want you to follow the link. They want you to go to the website that they're providing to you. And if you do, then that gives them access to obtain some of your funds.
And then next is mail, and it's very similar to email, right? Whether it's somebody sending something actually through the post office, or even just if it's somebody locally, it might slip something into your mailbox to make it seem like it came from the actual post office. They can include promises of prize money or a variety of other schemes, but their main goal is to get you in contact with the fraudster, because if you end up calling or getting in contact with the fraudster yourself, it makes it seem that much more legitimate.
And then in person, like we talked about the last slide, 52% of all the fraud schemes are friends and family. In person is a large way that people do steal from you, right? And so they're physically going into your space or physically going into your possessions and taking money and taking other items from you.
And then our final category, which might be the most prevalent, is social media, right? Things like Facebook or other platforms are great tools for keeping up with friends and family. I know that I use it myself, having moved south, and I saw a lot of family members up north. And so it's a great way for them to keep connected and see what's going on in my life. Unfortunately, it's also a great platform for fraud actors, right? How much information do you actually have on your Facebook or on your other social medias that's personal to you that is just out there for the world to see? And here on the next slide, we'll actually dive a little bit deeper into social media just because we want to put that much emphasis on it.
Yeah, and so one thing I want us to recall from the video that we watched in the beginning, there's a little line that said scammers often find personal information about the victims. The main way that they do that is through social media. And you'd be surprised at how often we talk with people that have no idea how the subject or how the bad guy got a hold of their information and their name and their family members, and we say it's because of your social media. And so we're going to take a quick glance at this is just a generic social media account. Just want to make everyone aware of what kind of information fraudsters can use. Like we'll talk a little bit about later, but a fraudster generally their only job is to learn about you and to learn about the people that they want to eventually take their money from. And this also definitely includes romance scams. Most of the romance scams victims I fall into, they've been reached out on social media and are used the information they have. So on this generic account, a lot of people, we can put our political affiliations, we can put past occupations, we can put where we're from, where we've lived, where we went to high school, what our marital status is. So just looking at this page alone, I know that this lady she worked at the Alabama Republican Party, therefore I could safely assume she's probably a Republican, right? And I could gear my persona and my scheme to fit that. I know she studied nursing at the University of Alabama. She could still be a nurse, but she definitely has that background I can appeal to. I can look at the high school to see the mascots, to see a lot of different things of where she went to high school at, and again, her location. I know where she's currently living. I know where she's from. All of these are bits of information that a fraudster can use, especially if he's trying to court someone, if he's trying to start the romantic relationship to then steal money from. A lot of this is information that would be very helpful for that. One of the key places that we see, though, are on family members. You can list family members, you can list all your friends, images, photos, everything like that. Bad guys will go through your social media, they'll look for family members because a lot of the fraud schemes will involve those family members. They might introduce themselves to you saying, hey, I'm a friend of your uncle's, and they might name your uncle. And that's how they get in on that. And so we really need to be aware of the information that we have on our social media. There are ways, if you go to your settings, you can hide your Facebook profile. You can hide your social media from anyone other than your friends, and that gives you a little bit more of a safer route. I know when I'm doing investigations and I need to know about someone, one of the first things that we'll do is we'll go on their social media and we'll see what they're going to freely give to us. So just like hopefully the good guys are using that, the bad guys are definitely using that to learn more about you.
And so again, just putting emphasis on this slide, we really encourage everyone out there who has social media is to go in and like Mark said, check those settings, see what is actually out there for just anybody to find. I know that when we first started doing this initiative and putting together this presentation, I actually did this myself, and I was a little bit shocked at how much information even I was just providing to anybody who wanted it. And there are ways that you can go and limit, even if you'd like to have the certain information on there, limit who actually sees it, right? Maybe just to friends or to family members or even just yourself. But either way, making sure that information isn't out there just for anybody on the internet to actually be able to see.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the top 5 scams in South Carolina. So this is for 2022. We've updated it to reflect last year. As we can see, and that's why we're spending the majority of our time today, in addition to it being Valentine's Day, is number 1 was the confidence fraud and romance scams. So this is a huge issue. It's the number one reason why people are losing their money in South Carolina right now. We also have email compromise, technical support fraud, investment fraud, and government impersonation fraud. In our normal talk, we will talk about all 5 of these in depth. Because of today's theme, we're just going to focus on confidence fraud and romance scams. And so we'll probably present at some other point where we can go into the other ones, but we really just want to focus on the romance games today.
So in South Carolina, or let me first define or kind of give you an example of truly what confidence or romance games are. So the scammers will attempt to form a relationship with you, right? You're the victim. Develop what the victim feels like is a genuine connection, right? Somebody you truly know, a friend, a loved one. Eventually, this fraudster or scammer will make up some story as to why they need money. This could be for medical expenses, travel needs, or anything that makes it appear as though you, the victim, are their only support, right? They're tugging on those heartstrings to make it seem like you are the only one in a position that can actually help them. And they try to form those relationships so you feel more obligated to actually provide that relief. And here, as you can see on the screen, in South Carolina, the 2022 reported losses, again, reported being the key word, 1 out of 44, was about $7.8 million. That is a very large number. That's a very frightening number. And again, that also has only really included people 60 years or older. It falls to that elder category. And so Mark will have an example of some of the things that we've actually worked on.
Yeah, and just for comparison's sake, I think in 2016, I think that number was around 1 million.
Yeah, it was close to about 1 million.
So again, in 6 years, it's jumped up 7 times what it was. So it's growing, and it will continue to grow. So an example of this, there was a woman that I ended up speaking with. Her husband had passed away, I think, in about April of that year. So 5 months later, she was lonely. Her family lived in a different state. She had no one to talk with. She really just wanted a relationship with someone, and not even an intimate relationship with someone. She just wanted to be friends. She wanted someone to talk with. At that point, someone added her on Facebook. She didn't know who this person was, but the person was nice. The person reached out and started talking with her. They spoke for a couple months, and it was strictly friendship. They talked about their days. They talked about just all the issues that only friends would do, right? And sooner or later, so after a couple months, it slowly turned romantic to where the individual started calling her his girlfriend. She started calling him her boyfriend and things like that. And at that point, even money wasn't even transferred at that point, right? So he spent another month just being her boyfriend and committing to that relationship and speaking with her every day. They called on the phone a few times. It really looked like an authentic, legitimate relationship. Once that trust was built, the bad guy asked for a little bit of money because he was going through some hard times, and so the woman gave him that money. Once that happened, he then said, "Hey, I want to come out to see you. I need a couple $1,000s," because he was living across the country. So she gave him the $1,000. He bought the ticket. He sent her a screenshot of a plane ticket, which turns out it was a fake one because he never showed up. He created an excuse of not showing up. He asked for more money. At one point, he asked for a new phone. He asked for gift cards. And by the time we spoke with her, she still thought she was in the relationship with him. So I had to sit there and try to convince her that this person wasn't real, that this person was stealing from her. What we thought she had lost only about $50,000. She ended up saying that it was around $200,000 she had given to him over the course of about 8 months. And again, she thought this was a committed relationship, and she had no idea that she was a victim.
Yeah, so one point too that we like to make with these is that for a lot of these fraudsters or scammers, this is their full-time job, right? That's why they're able to dedicate months, right? Maybe not just days, definitely not hours, weeks, months, but they are actually willing to put in the time to build those relationships. So that way, when us as law enforcement actually are able to sit down and talk with them, they're less likely to believe us because we're just been in their lives for a couple hours, whereas these individuals committing these frauds have been in their lives for weeks, if not months, if not even years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so specifically, right, why are these romance scams so successful? Because they are. They're the #1 issue that we face. It's the #1 money getter for the bad guys. And so here are some reasons, right? They're well-rehearsed scripts. Like Brian was saying, these are people, their full-time job is coming up with the perfect script and a perfect way to speak with someone in order to build that relationship. If you are a victim, you're not the only one. We speak with victims monthly, and a lot of the schemes sound the exact same. Most likely it's by the same person or the same group. And they're scouring about, and they're trying thousands of people each week, each day even. And really all they need is one person to bite, and then they fund their organization for a month or even longer, depending on how much money they get. And they also target more likely victims. They know which victims are more likely to present opportunities for them. they're not likely to go after someone who's married, someone maybe who looks a little bit, maybe a little bit in a position to where they would know that someone's trying to steal their money. So those are the reasons why they're so successful. This one is tough because, like Brian was saying, that it's all built on trust, right? And it's a slow process of building that trust to where they've talked for months at a time and they have tons of relationship and prior history with that person. And then when we come in, like Brian was saying, we have an hour to try to convince them that this isn't real. And they've had 6 months to a year to even longer of saying this is real and this is legitimate and we're in love and we're going to be together. So it is successful because of those reasons.
So now we would like to go over kind of like what we call this idea. You might be in a romance scam. Some red flags to look at. I mean, one thing I would encourage y'all to recognize is that a lot of these kind of build on top of each other. You know, someone you don't know adds you on social media and begins talking.
And real quick, this doesn't mean, if any of these apply to you, it doesn't mean you're definitely in a romance scam. If as the numbers start building up, we want you to think about any relationships you might have that are social media only, or began social media only. And if the numbers start to add up, the more likely you are. So we're not saying if one of these next 10 that's true, we're not telling you that you're automatically in a romance scam, but it is a possibility, and we want you to open your eyes to that possibility.
Right, it should be something in the back of your mind to kind of assess as you go forward. So again, someone you don't know adds you on social media and begins talking with you. You should really be wary if it's just a random person that you don't have any background with, you've never talked to before, starts messaging you for really what comes down to no apparent reason. And even more so, if this person, you do have a conversation with them, or you talk to them over the course of a few weeks or months, and you notice that it's starting to turn from a friendly conversation into more romantic. I think as Mark and as the next few slides say, they start calling you boyfriend or girlfriend or telling you that they love you, when really you've never actually met this person. Those should all be red flags in the back of your mind saying, what is their true motivation here? What are they after? And thinking of ways to protect myself from potentially losing life savings. Some of the other red flags, if there's a drastic age difference, if the person, especially for elders, tends to be significantly younger, right? Sometimes we might like that, but that again should be a red flag as to what is this person's true motivations, and then are they currently living overseas or across the country, like the example Mark gave. That is something that they might use as a way to get you funds. Are they asking you for money for travel, right? Plane tickets can be very expensive, especially if you're going across the country or over the ocean. It can be a large amount of money that they might say, hey, can you fund this plane ticket for me to come see you? And unfortunately, what we see over and over again is that even after the money is sent, there's always an excuse as to why that travel can't take place. So continuing, if you've never spoke with your online partner over the phone, or even if you've spoken to them over a typical telephone, just voice to voice, but then I've never actually seen their face live, it might be an indication that the person you're talking to or the persona that they're playing isn't actually who they are. And there's a reason that you've never seen their face in a true video or actually heard their voice. And then the next ones have to do with money, the funds. Again, if they start asking you for money, or even other items, they don't have to be actual money, but they might be high-priced items, electronics, phones, we see all the time. And then gift cards. And this sounds odd, but again, it's one of the things that we see all the time, where instead of just asking somebody for just straight cash, they might say, go to Lowe's and buy 50 gift cards with $100 on them each and send them to me. If you're talking to somebody online and they are asking you for these unique or strange requests, especially if it's dealing with gift cards, again, they should be sending off little flags in the back of your head saying, hey, this might not be a good situation for me to be in. Like I previously mentioned, if a person comes and talks about coming to visit you, again, they'll ask you for the money. A plane ticket might be a couple $1,000s, and then there's always going to be a reason as to why that travel can't actually happen. And it might not be travel. It might be that they tell about difficulties in their life, right? They had a sick daughter or a sick parent, or even they might be in the hospital and they need you to help fund their medical expenses. again, they're going to try to tug on those heartstrings to make you feel like that you are the only person that's actually out there that can help them, and that they are truly depending on you. So now that we kind of talked about these, what are some of the tips that you can do to protect yourself? Well, a big one is just knowing that there are people out there that do this. Right? Knowing, unfortunately, we hear it a lot of times that they couldn't actually believe that somebody out there would do this to them, right? They didn't think that people could be this cruel. Unfortunately, in the world that we live in nowadays, right? The connectivity of the internet, that somebody all the way on the other side of the earth can get a hold with you within seconds. They don't always have your best interest. And I would go as far as to say is most people, most of the time, probably aren't going to have your best interest. So just knowing that this is a possibility, right? And keeping all those red flags in the back of your mind can actually help. Never send money to someone you have never met in person. We can't stress this enough. If you haven't actually been able to sit down at a table across from them and build a true relationship, and they start asking you for money, you need to be asking yourself if you are involved in some sort of scam. Gift cards, again, we just talked about it. Don't buy gift cards in bulk or make any of these strange purchases. That it's a way that the reason that they do it is it's because it's harder for law enforcement to track money when you buy any gift cards as opposed to just sending a check or cash. And so if you find yourselves in a situation where you're buying these large amounts of gift cards or even electronics, you really need to be asking yourself, hey, is this a scam? And then never travel overseas to meet someone for the first time. There are a multitude of ways that we would warn somebody against this. Mm-hmm. And that's, again, I would really warn a lot of people that if you're talking to somebody who says that they're overseas and wants you to travel to them or asking that you send them money for their travel to meet you, that it's something that you really need to be aware of and ask yourself if this is potentially a scam.
Yeah, and traveling overseas, but in addition, traveling local, we've had situations where someone has traveled and purchased money, bought a hotel room to go visit a loved one, and they actually went there and no one was there. So now they're stranded in a place that they don't know of, that they've never been, and it can get pretty dangerous for them.
So continuing on, don't send money to strangers. Again, we really can't stress this enough, that if you don't know who the person is, don't send them money. Don't agree to receive and send money for someone else. So what do we mean by that? Is that a lot of the times, they might not be trying to steal from you directly, but you might be part of a larger organization or a larger conspiracy where they're stealing from a third party, and they send the money that they stole to you and then ask you to send it to somebody else. You're not actually losing any money yourself in this transaction, but what you are contributing to and what the role you play in this is being a money mule. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to get that money that they stole through as many hands as possible, trying to wash that money and make it harder for law enforcement to actually know that fraud to go on. And I apologize, some of these are repeating themselves, and I think in the process of trying to make this a little bit more romance scam oriented, we haven't repeated ourselves sometimes. But again, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because again, knowing that people pose as romantic partners on the internet to steal from you is a huge part of actually being able to fight and protect yourself. And then our next one here is know that the federal government will not call you to ask you for your personal information. As you can see, going back to our top scams for last year, government impersonation was up there. It's actually one that it wasn't up there in the years leading up to last year, but then made its appearance. And so know that as the FBI or a different federal agency, that we will not call you and ask you to provide your social security number, your date of birth, things like that. If we need that information, agents are more than likely going to just show up at your door or try to find you in person, and that way we can actually provide you with credentials that let you know who our true identities are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you'd be surprised. As a part of the job, we have to interview people, and sometimes they're in a different location where we have to do it by phone. And I make it a point to not ask for any identifying information from them, because I don't want to train them to give that to people. And there's a lot of people I speak with. When I announce myself, all I say is Mark McMahon, a special agent with the FBI, and all I ask for is their name and their phone number that I've already called for confirmation of that. And then they'll list off their social security number, their date of birth, their address, and I stop them and I say, hey, like, I am who I say I am, but a lot of times you don't know that. And so you shouldn't be giving that information over the phone to someone. And just more general tips too, other than just the romance scams, never give your information to strangers. So never give them to government officials on the phone. Also never give them to anyone who's a stranger, who you don't know, who asks you for any type of identifying information, social security numbers, date of birth, home address, anything that would be like a password question, right? Mother's maiden name, name of the first pet. Anyone who asks you a question that seems a little strange, definitely think twice before giving it to them, because most likely they have a reason for that question. Authenticate charities during tax season, which is coming up soon. We see this a lot. People trying to give money away, which is great, but they'll fall victim and they'll give to charities whose only purpose is to collect money. So we always want to authenticate the charities to make sure the money we're giving is actually going to do good and not to help fund criminal organizations. We would suggest to consider identity theft monitoring programs. The three main credit bureaus also allow you to freeze your credit. So this is, we would suggest this for everyone, no matter what stage of life they're in, college age student to elder. And all this does is you go to one of the credit bureaus, you freeze your credit. It doesn't allow any new credit cards to be issued. It doesn't allow anything where your credit check would be pulled. It doesn't allow credit cards, new bank accounts, large purchases, anything like that you're safe from if you freeze your credit. It's really easy. If you need to make a large purchase or you need to open a credit card or do something like that, it takes a few minutes to unfreeze your credit. You complete the process and then you refreeze your credit right away. That will go a long way at protecting you from potentially losing large sums of money.
Absolutely. And then we do want to put a note here that if you find yourself involved in a situation like this, we urge you to pause, right? Maybe take a day to think about it and talk to a trusted family member or friend. Most of the time we find that by giving yourself time to think, talking to somebody that you know, that you can trust, bringing someone else into the situation for a second pair of eyes will help you immensely going to protect yourself. So what as us or ourselves as the FBI, what are we actually doing about this? Well, the best way is to prevent elder fraud is to prevent it from ever happening in the first place, right? Try to stop it before the victims lose money, which is why we're committing to doing initiatives like this, reaching out, promoting education to prevent you from falling victim in the first place. We're identifying the trends, right? We gave you the top 5 for 2022. Those are more than likely going to be the scams that you may encounter going forward into 2023. Public outreach, we're getting with groups like we are today, again, educate to try to get in front, right? We want to be proactive instead of reactive to this problem and empower potential victims to protect themselves. Because unfortunately, a lot of the times it's very difficult, if not nearly impossible, to actually try to retrieve the money once it's gone.
All right, so how do you report? Let's say you listen to this, you listen to the talk, you looked at the red flags, and you think you may be a victim of a romance scam or of another type of scam, right? There's actually 3 different ways to do it. You can go to ic3.gov. That's going to be our main source to add your information. It's really easy. There's a button you follow. It lists all the information that you have about the fraud scheme, and then it submits. All of the data that we get comes from IC3. And so that's why it's a huge response, and that allows them to funnel it to the correct agency and the correct field office in order to address the issues. You can also call 1-800-CALL-FBI and do the same thing. And then we have tips /FBI.gov. It's important to note you need to include as much information as you have. The more information that we have, the more likely we are to actually catch the bad guy. And so some information, right, is names of the individuals that they use, the first days of contacts, the method of contact information they gave you, what type of financial transactions, if they've given you bank accounts or wire instructions. All of that is extremely important to help us to combat this and try to get the money back and to hold the person accountable who's doing it.
And we really want to put an emphasis on why you can report. Because unfortunately, in a lot of cases, especially ones that have been happening for years, and the victims have lost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that money is gone, and there's really very limited, if no ways to get that money back. So why should you still report it, right? If you've already been the victim, or you already have a friend who's been the victim, and we can't get your money back, why still report it? Well, it's how we got a lot of the data and a lot of the information for today's presentation. How do we know that romance and confidence frauds are the largest threat currently in South Carolina? Well, it's because people went to ic3.gov or called the FBI to report what happened, right? And a lot of the times these fraudsters are overseas and very hard, difficult to obtain. But if we notice trends that they're using a lot of the same information to provide to their victims, that it makes it a little bit easier for us to target. But again, we wouldn't know that information unless people are actually reporting. If we don't know, if people aren't reporting, then we don't have a true picture of what's going on in our state, and we can't help provide that information to the public.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We do have some time for questions. I'm not sure if have any come in, but I think Susan will be reading those to us, and we'll ask. We'll hang on here for a little bit longer too if there are no questions to give people time to type into the chat.
That was terrific. Thank you so much. And we do have some questions, and what a great presentation, you guys. We really do appreciate it. And I will say that some of the questions that we're getting, no surprise, do have to do with, the idea of how do we convince a person, particularly an older person, that this is a romance scam. And I just want to tell our viewers, I think one of the first things that you can do, because it is so hard to convince people of this, show them this video. We're going to post it on our YouTube channel. Show them this video, because you've got two excellent folks from the FBI who are, giving you all those telltale signs, all those red flags. Mm-hmm. And what better authority than Mark and Brian? So that would be the first thing that I think.
And just real quick on that. So one of our main jobs is to try to convince these people to not fall victim and to continue falling victims. And we still fail a lot of the time. So if this is a one-time situation and you've never done something like this before, and you're trying to convince a loved one that they're a victim, it's tough. Brian and I actually, so we sat with someone at the end of last year, and we laid out all of it. We laid out the red flags. We laid out how it doesn't make sense and all the inconsistencies with the stories. And we thought we did a really good job at trying to do that. And at the very end, he basically said, look, like, I need to fall victim to this in order to know that it's not true. Right. And so we consider that a failure on our part, because eventually he did end up spending that money and realizing at that time that it was a fraud scheme. So it is extremely tough. Like we said, it's so much easier for them to believe someone that they've had those personal, intimate conversations with than it is to believe us or even some family members that they might feel ashamed about addressing.
Right. Okay, and so I think that answers the first question that we had, which is how can I convince a senior citizen she's being scammed, but she believes she has a new boyfriend overseas? That was one of the first questions that came in. So I think we.
Real quick, I'll make one more point to that as well, is that banks or the financial institutions where the victim does their banking are great resources. And I would encourage everyone, obviously, even if your name is not on the account, to go talk to the bank and lay out the facts for them and just tell them that, I may or may not be on this bank account, but, my mother or my father, this is their primary account and this is what's happening, right? And the banks, a lot of the times, have resources, really good resources to try to help. Obviously, it's going to depend on what bank, and different banks might have different resources. But I would encourage everyone out there who has a loved one that maybe just doesn't want to listen or doesn't believe what their family is saying, to reach out to their bank to see what resources or options you might have that route as well.
Because the banks will see the spending habits, and they'll see what normally was a grocery trip a week has turned into thousands of dollars in gift cards or wires, and the bank will have all that information, so they'll definitely be able to help.
And they do have an interest in trying to protect their both their bank and their customers from these type of frauds as well.
Yeah, and here in South Carolina, we have the elder financial exploitation law that's only about a year and a half old, but that does give banks some leeway if they have reason to believe that a transaction that's coming through may be a fraud or exploitation of an elder citizen. So I think that's really great advice. Okay, well, here's another question. I work in protective services and I'm seeing more victims purchasing cryptocurrency and sending it to their romantic partner. Is there anything we can do to help get cryptocurrency back? Is that any different?
Again, a lot of it's very hard, and the biggest factor as to whether money can be retrieved or not is the time or how long it takes to be reported. That's the best advice we can really give on it. Is just that the sooner that this is reported, the more likely it is that we're able to get your money back. Unfortunately, with cryptocurrency, it's wild. It's a wild west essentially. It's still relatively new. I think a lot of law enforcement agencies, both federal and local, are kind of struggling with the best way to address that. But the best advice I can give to that is just report it to law enforcement, report it to IC3 as quickly as possible. That'll give you the best chance to get funds back, regardless of really how they were sent.
Okay, here's another one. We've had a couple customers report that they have video chatted with the person on more than one occasion. Are you hearing this from victims as well? And are there ways for people to set up a video chat where it looks like they're actually talking with a live person, but maybe they're not?
Yeah, I mean, I think as technology grows, there's definitely ways to edit videos. The editing software that's out there now is they can make pretty much anyone say anything that they want. So I would venture to say, even if that one, if on the red flag list, if someone is actually speaking to them in person and over FaceTime, do all the other red flags fit? Even if they are speaking FaceTime to FaceTime, but they're asking for money, they're making these plans, they're doing all the other things that would fall into a romance scam. That would be the thing I would lean on, rather than trying to convince someone that they're using edited video or that they're creating that type of software, which is possible, and we know it's possible. But I wouldn't necessarily use that in order to convince someone that they're a victim.
Right, and that's a great question, because as Mark said, yes, technology is getting much better, right? And so again, I would personally fall back on is, have I been able to meet this person face to face, sit across the table, have a cup of coffee with them? If the answer to that is no, then I'm always going to be very suspicious of what that person says to me. What are the things that they ask me? And again, are they asking me for money? That'll always be my number one red flag. As soon as someone honestly, even if it's somebody I do know and they're asking me for money, I'm going to have some red flags raising up as to why do they want this money. And that's something that you should always be asking yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because we talk about don't give money to a stranger, but when it comes to a romance scam, I think the victim doesn't see the alleged romantic partner as a stranger.
Yeah, it's not a stranger. It's
as a love interest, and so I think the definition of stranger is important.
Absolutely.
Okay. There is a question about money mules, and y'all did, I think, touch on that just a little bit. Are y'all seeing the money mule thing happen a lot? Maybe just explain that in a little bit more detail. Not too much detail, because we got a lot of questions here. But
yeah, so I guess quickly, so money mule is basically just the term that we give for a network of sending money to and from other individuals. And so if I were to steal money initially, it's really easy for law enforcement to track it straight to me if I have the victim wire me the money. So instead, I'll have the victim wire money to another individual who's in a different state. Then I'll have that individual wire money to another person who's in a different state. I'll have that person wire money to another one, and I'll create this whole network. Each of those individual people, they don't necessarily know exactly what the money's from. They might be a victim of a fraud themselves. And so whether they're witting or unwitting, we call them money mules. So basically, that's just the term for someone who's receiving money from somewhere they don't know, and then they're sending money to somewhere they don't know. And it is illegal. So technically what they're doing is illegal. We don't necessarily prosecute them right away, but we do talk with them.
Okay, now here's one that's not exactly a question, but I think it's an excellent example of what can happen. And they say, we've had a few customers tell us that they've met a suspected romance scammer in person, but just once. And in a couple of the cases, they were able to confirm that the customer traveled to a different state and went on a date. And in one of those cases, it resulted in the customer's social security number and other personal information being stolen out of their wallet while they went to the bathroom. That is a great example of what can happen, even if you do meet the person in person like that. Okay. Yeah, and this is true. One of our viewers says retailers have trained a lot of their customer service employees in these red flags to be able to help those who are victims. And I've certainly seen that a lot with clients here at South Carolina Legal Services, where maybe they've gone to buy those gift cards that y'all were talking about, and the store manager comes to them. And, you know, sometimes it comes up right there on the, when you're at the cashier area cashing out. But sometimes the actual store manager will be alerted and will come and say, hey, are you sure about this? And so I think that's really been a wonderful trend that I think's been happening. And
yeah, definitely. One of our investigations actually started because a Home Depot store manager came to us with someone who was buying large amounts of Home Depot.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Ron says, we appreciate the work of the FBI in countering romance scams. The FDIC has included that topic in its Money Smart for Older Adults product and at preventing financial exploitation of seniors. So we'll definitely, Kenneth, if you would put that in the chat for us, that web address, that'd be great. Here's someone who's a resident service coordinator for senior handicapped residents and subsidized housing. And this was something that happened on the personal phone. Someone texted a full-blown sob story, and the text came from a contact that was already in my phone. Oh yeah, the spoofing can really fool you. They wanted me to buy a gift card for a friend of theirs. I immediately called the friend who the chat supposedly came from, and they told me their phone was hacked. So very interested to help prevent this from happening to residents that we take care of and help get services for them here in New Hampshire. Wow, we've got some people from all over the country listening in, New Hampshire, Ohio, all kinds of places. And yeah, any thoughts on that, what you can do with the phone spoofing, other than obviously what we're doing today, which is education? And we appreciate
again, I think oh, sorry. I think it just comes back to that people need to realize these are, for a lot of these fraudsters or scammers, this is their full-time job. This is what they do 7 days a week, 24/7. And even as law enforcement catches up to what they're currently doing, right, then they're going to change up their tactics and do something a little bit different that might throw potential victims off. And so again, I think we just go back to is someone asking you for money, and I kind of mentioned it earlier, even if it is somebody that I know is asking me for money, right, that's still going to raise some flags as to why do they want this money, what would it be used for, and just need to take a real close look at the situation and be very cautious.
Yeah, and here's a good follow-up to that. Angie says, how do we at banks get people to understand that we aren't being nosy when asking questions? We are just making sure someone isn't a potential elder financial exploitation victim. Thoughts on that, fellas?
Yeah, I mean, I think what my kind of a personal belief that I have is I'd rather them not like me or think I'm annoying than them lose money, right? I care more about them not being a victim than them liking me. So I've had situations where I've had to tell the victim, try to in order to try to convince them, I've had to tell them that, you know, why would a 25-year-old Swedish supermodel like you, right? And it's me. But it's kind of that same aspect that if we're trying to really help them, then we just have to look past them liking us or them maybe giving a complaint. And if I get a complaint against me that I asked them a mean question, but it was because I didn't want them to lose money, then I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, what if you are working with someone who is adamant they are not being scammed, when you know they are 100% being scammed. I mean, I think that's kind of what we've been talking about, but any other thoughts on that? And certainly, one thing that comes to my mind, and this is why I appreciate you guys from law enforcement being here with us, and that is, one thing you can maybe try is to say, well, if in fact it is a scam, or if in fact this is fraud, the person who is doing this may be subject to arrest because what they're doing is illegal. So if there's any chance that that might be the case, then you are hurting this person that you think is so wonderful. I don't know. That's what comes to my mind.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing too, I'd like to make people aware of is that the victim, right, doesn't have to be on board for you all to report it. Just because you can have a parent or a family member, or even if you work at a bank and have a customer who doesn't believe you, oh, I'm not part of the scam, there's no way, this has never happened. That doesn't prevent you from, if you know their information, and it doesn't even have to be all their information. It can just be as detailed as you can make it to be able to report it to us. And then, allow law enforcement, because maybe it will just take an FBI agent showing up at somebody's door, with their credentials or with a badge to really kind of explain things. And maybe that's what'll make it click in their mind of, hey, I'm a part of something where someone's trying to defraud me. So just because they aren't on board with it doesn't mean that you can't go ahead and report it, and doesn't mean that we wouldn't necessarily go ahead and try to help you.
Yeah, about half of all the individuals that we talk with are probably reported by someone else and not that actual victim.
Right. I know we've gone over an hour, but if y'all can stay for just a few more minutes, we would love it. There are a few more questions I'd love for you to address if we get anything new. I do see here, in elder fraud situations, it's always important for everyone to have that trusted contact, which you all talked about, on their financial account relationship, so the financial institutions can reach out to those trusted contacts. I think that's a great point, because when the bank is observing a red flag and they don't know who to contact, they don't have to necessarily be a signer on your account. They could just be someone who is a trusted contact for the bank. And I think a lot of banks are doing that now.
Absolutely, yes.
But the great presentation, folks are saying, can you please provide the info to report a scam? And I think that was on your slide.
Yeah, so and there's a link in the chat right now. There's a link, the correct link, the HTTPS.
And I do apologize. They did update the link for the tips. It is tips.fbi.gov, not /, which I do think Kenneth had put in there.
The correct link in there.
But I will say though, ic3.gov is the best. So if you call the FBI, if you do the 1-800-CALL-FBI or tips.fbi.gov, those actually still get forwarded to the ic3.gov. ic3 is a section of the FBI. It's called the IC3. It's Internet Crimes and Complaints Center, and it is a unit within the FBI that this is solely what they do all day, every day. Is they're intaking these tips, they're compiling the information, they're sorting the data, sending it to the field offices, so that way someone like me can come along and see what is affecting my AOR, my area of responsibility. So the IC3.gov is the primary website that you'd want to go to.
There will be a faster response with IC3 than the other two, because the other two do have to get funneled to IC3 and then funneled to us.
Okay. The next two questions are kind of related, so I'll give them both to you. How do you get your cases? And then also, is the best place to send elders when this happens to them the police or the FBI? We've sent people to the police and they say that they are told they would never catch them, so felt like they should have not gone to the police at all. What's your thoughts on that, and how do you get your cases in this area?
Yeah, I mean, I think for getting the money back, it's definitely an issue that the FBI would be the ones to solve. Local police don't have jurisdiction to get these foreign bank accounts or the bank accounts that are going across the country. So it kind of depends. If you're wanting someone to show up with almost immediately, right, their response time is going to be very quick. And if you need someone to convince them that they're a victim, then local police might be your great first step. Just due to the fact that the FBI generally will take a little bit longer to come speak with someone. And by longer, just not that day. It might be a week later, less than a week later. But ultimately, FBI is the one that has the ability to potentially get any money back. So that's kind of the differentiation of those two. And then what was the first question?
How do you get your cases?
How do we,
Yeah, so a lot of times it will be, it's the people report it. When they do go to IC3, you do have somebody who is taking in that information, who actually reads through the report, and depending upon the details, that it can have a greater emphasis placed on it. So if there is a chance that this just happened, right? Say someone was scammed and they just lost their money today, right? As soon as they hit that send button on that wire transfer, or put the gift cards in the mail, or however they do it, and that's like, oh, you know what? I probably shouldn't have done this. I think I might be a scam, which happens. You report it immediately. Someone at IC3 reads that and realizes this has just happened. There's a greater chance that if we act now that we can get the money back, then they can put a greater emphasis on that when it's sent to the field office, and we can get somebody out there to help that person a little bit quicker than, let's say, this has been happening for years now, and they've lost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and family members have finally convinced them that this is a scam and they're no longer sending money, but we would still like somebody to come out and talk to us. Just given the sheer number of how many times that this happens, it might, again, like Mark said, it take a while for us to get out there and actually be able to talk to somebody. So there is a way that we can put a greater emphasis on something that's just happened now in order to try to increase the chance.
Sooner the better.
Yeah, exactly.
The better. Are there any protections for victims of romance scams who were unknowing participants in money laundering?
Yeah, so like I mean, and I know I briefly mentioned it, but yeah, being a money mule is technically illegal, right? Because you're helping the process of money laundering. We don't necessarily, if someone comes forward and says, hey, I think I'm a victim, or I think I'm a money mule, that there's really very little chance of prosecution in that regard, because they're helping us, and most likely they can give us information that'll help us catch the people that are actually doing the fraud schemes, or actually the end results of the money. So it does, if you believe you're a money mule, it definitely helps to call us. And I mean, obviously it's a lot better for us to hear from a money mule than it is for us to get an investigation that points out a money mule.
Okay.
At the end of the day, our objectives aren't necessarily trying to go after the people who were just caught up in this, right, and are just transferring money. Their objectives are to get the person at the end of the line, and if the money mule is able to help us get there, then we'll be using that as an asset.
Okay. Well, great answer. So we still have a few more questions, but it's 10 after 1, and I do want to go ahead and close out here in a minute. And I just want to let our viewers know that Brian and Mark have said that they would be glad to try to finish the questions that are in the question box here for us after we have signed off for the day. So we definitely appreciate that. And let's go ahead and go to our South Carolina Legal Services information slide. I know one of our viewers was asking about our, just a minute, let's get to my screen. Terrific. Let's see here. All right. Do you see that slide, fellas?
I still see our slide. There we go.
Okay. You see the full slide for me there?
Yep.
Okay, great. And like I said, Mark and Brian have agreed to let us send them the rest of the questions and answer those, at least the questions that they are able to answer. Obviously, they can't talk about specific cases any more than we as lawyers can talk about specific cases on these. But right now, we are showing our viewers all the information about how to contact South Carolina Legal Services if you're having one of these issues or some other issue that you think we might be able to help you with as lawyers. We do have also all of our social media handles here, our websites, and you can find all of the information that we've been talking about today and more there. And we do encourage you, especially to go to our YouTube channel where we have 1,800 subscribers, but boy, we sure are shooting for that 2,000 number right now. But also, that's where you'll see all of the previous episodes of Level Up Law. There's about 125 of them at this point, so they're about all kinds of different topics. So I recommend that you go to SC Legal Services on YouTube and search for that Level Up Law playlist, and you may be able to find some answers to the questions that you have on this or other topics. And also, there's that QR code you can scan and become on our list of our email newsletter, which is a really good resource as well. So let me thank our speakers, Special Agent McMahon and Analyst Knight, for really an excellent presentation. That was really so interesting on a lot of levels, both what you guys do as FBI agents and also just how to spot those romance scams and all the different trends that you are seeing. I did also want to thank again our South Carolina WEAD Task Force. As I said at the beginning, that World Elder Abuse Awareness Day group has came together back in 2020, and on June 15th, which is World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. But now, with all of our partners, we are educating folks throughout the year. And when we have World Elder Abuse Awareness Day in June, once again, we will be having weekly events for the folks in our community. So we're really just stepping up our game all the time to help our elders here in South Carolina and across the country. I also want to thank you, our audience, for joining us today, and also every week on Level Up Law. And also, if you're watching the replay on our YouTube channel, thank you for being with us and checking it out. We hope you find this information helpful. And if you know it'll be helpful to others, go ahead and share it out on from YouTube or any of our social media. We want as many people as possible to get the important information that we bring to you here on Level Up Law, and today's presentation is definitely no exception. And again, while you're there, like and subscribe for more. And I want to thank Mark and Brian once again. It was a great presentation, and we look forward to answering everyone's questions to the best that we can. And you guys are doing a great job out there. Keep doing what you're doing. And we really appreciate that you understand at the FBI the great importance of public education and outreach. And we appreciate you being with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in today on Level Up Law. Check it out next week. Be sure to tune in for another episode of Level Up Law, Tuesday at noon. And we will have as our guest the Center for Heirs Property out of Charleston, South Carolina, who are helping people and have been for quite some time deal with the problems that come with heirs property, where you've got so many owners of one piece of property and it makes it hard to do anything with your property. But they have ways to help, and they're going to talk about that next week here on Level Up Law. Thanks again for tuning in today, and thanks to our speakers. That concludes today's webinar. Thanks, everybody.